AI-assisted development has made the pull requests larger and more frequent. At the same time, GitHub, the most popular open source platform or platform for code reviews and pull requests, hasn't got any better. Or, as we all probably noticed in the last few months, it got even worse and less reliable. I actually stopped using GitHub pull request review long ago and was mostly using the approach of checking out the branch or repository locally, running the tests or running the codebase, sometimes using the agents if needed. However, it changed recently when CodeRabbit launched their new review UI, also called the change stack. And it's been really great. The change stack reorganizes your pull request into layer-by-layer walkthrough. So instead of looking at the alphabetically ordered list of files, you now see the chunks of work that actually needs to be reviewed. And there are nice features like diagrams and charts, and it actually feels like using some LSP in the web, so it's been really great. With that being said, let's actually give it a try on an average-sized pull request with GoCode. I have this open source project called Formulosity, which is basically a surveys or questionnaires as code platform. It lets you build surveys using code. So the idea is very simple. You define your questionnaire using multiple files. For example, there are some metadata files, questions files, and etc. The files are YAML configurations, so you can give it a title, you can specify the list of questions, and the tool does everything for you. So let me actually run the UI so you have the idea. So the backend is in Go, but UI is in Vue, and there is some simple admin panel, there are some surveys, and when we open them, there are basically questions that been defined in YAML files. You can obviously change the design of everything, and it's quite configurable. And there was a feature proposal to make the questions conditional based on the previous answers, and also to be able to pipe those answers into the following questions. So for example, maybe if I select the languages here and go next, maybe it will ask me about the Go experience, right? Because I answered it. I wouldn't consider it as a very hard problem, but still it involves changing multiple parts of the system. Imagine you have to change the API in Go that we have, you have to change the documentation and also the example YAML files, and also the formatting and parsing of and validation of all of that, as well as you have to do some UI updates to support that. I implemented it together with Codex, with some OpenAI model, which I forgot, probably was 5.4 back then, which was okay, but you still have to go back and forth on some code decisions, and also, as you know, you have to clean up a few things and write some tests, etc. Remember, this is an open source project, and even though there are some maintainers, it's usually quite slow to get a full pull request review, especially if your project is not that big. Luckily, we have CodeRabbit now, so let's give it a try. This actually, as you can see, it's not the biggest pull request, so we have 1,400 lines added and few lines removed, but I would say it's an average size, and you have to be very careful while reviewing that. As you probably know, if you use GitHub Review UI, it just goes alphabetical order, top to bottom, no context. So the first file you will see here some query, which is kind of unrelated to the context, right? We don't know what this query does. Big files are hidden completely. As you can see, UI is not that great. Let's go back to the pull request summary that I actually wrote myself. There are, as we can see, few features involved into the single PR. So one is to actually pipe the answers to the follow-up questions, so we can use the value. And another one is to introduce the visible if YAML condition that defines when to show the question. And as well, there are some documentation updates and UI updates. And from a modern review tool, I would expect something that's being able to group the code changes, the files, and the lines changed into these categories, into these groups. So I can review one by one and maybe mark something as reviewed and continue with the rest. So let's see if CodeRabbit does it better. I connected the repository once in CodeRabbit, so I don't have to do anything at all. I don't need to post and ping CodeRabbit, hey, review this PR. The review happens automatically. As it was with the previous versions of CodeRabbit, it posts first the summary into the pull request description field, and then it also makes all the comments and diagrams directly in the GitHub UI. However, as you can see, we're now tied to the GitHub UI, and it probably doesn't help you. There are still all these comments and files. So what they added is actually the button Review Change Stack, which redirects you directly to the CodeRabbit Review UI. So let's actually go there and forget for a while about GitHub. This opens up a nice review UI. We will go into the details and review some features. But first of all, to understand, this doesn't replace GitHub. Still, all the comments and code changes go into the GitHub because that's the main source of truth. The first screen in the middle is an overview of our pull request. So let's actually hide everything else. This is a nice UI, by the way. I like that you can focus on something. Let me also make it bigger. So here we are seeing our pull request summary in a human readable text, as well as we are seeing some high priority concerns, which people tend to go there right away. I actually like to skip it at first because as a developer, I want to understand what the pull request is doing first. So I would probably go into the walkthrough and maybe I would check the files, but also I probably would skip the files. But I would look into something like diagrams and the high-level overview to understand the complexity and the parts maybe that's being changed. Like, for example, there is a Postgres involved here. Probably some queries are happening and maybe I need to focus on that and review. Let's now go into my favorite part, which is layers. And honestly, after being using CodeRabbit for some time, I go here usually straight away because layers group the pull request into the chunks of logical work, so you can review them one by one. They also depend on each other, and which is very kind of intuitive, especially in our pull request, right? Because first of all, you want to review maybe the high-level decisions like contract of the YAML files and changes, then the configurations, then we go probably into the server, API, etc., and then UI at the end. I actually like this grouping for this pull request quite a lot. Now, if I click on a layer, I would see the code changes related to this chunk of functionality only. And that makes it very easy to review. We can open the panel that we recently closed to see the comments from CodeRabbit, just to see the kind of summary of the changes here, as well as any issues found. So in this layer, there were no issues identified, so I'll probably would just review the code myself, maybe still run it locally, and I can now review chunk by chunk. I can mark all this layer as viewed. What's also nice about this div is that it's actually quite performant. I can also click into the functions and it will open this code pick view and will tell me about references and usages of some variables and so on. So that's very helpful and generally quite nice UI if I don't want to check out yet locally. As I can already see, all the changes in this layer are related. They're about the conditions, about the contract, there are some tests at the end, and I can mark the whole layer as viewed, for example. Now, the second layer has some findings, so if you switch to the comments section, you'll be able to see some errors. And this one, for example, is an actual bug. For example, in the intro, we are using the name. However, the name cannot be set during the introduction because the name is only set at the question 1 or 2. So that's a nice proposal from CodeRabbit. Now, there are multiple options here for me. I can check out the branch locally and fix it myself, maybe run some tests, or I can use the proposed change, which is here probably, and committable suggestion, obviously review everything, and yeah, we can try it, and we can hit apply here. I would actually like if CodeRabbit would put a proper commit message here, because CodeRabbit kind of knows what we are fixing, but we can write it ourselves, right? All right, our fix is there. However, going back to the layer 1, I noticed one function that doesn't look nice to me, this function number, that basically casts all integers and unsigned integers to the float 64, which I think we can do better, but I'm not sure how exactly, maybe using the reflection. Viewers, if you know a better solution, let me know. And I would love to post a comment here. However, important to understand that there is another change, and we are looking at the old review. And this is a great feature of CodeRabbit as well, because there could be multiple changes while you're reviewing, and you may not look at the latest snapshot of your code. So it kind of tells you when the snapshots are ready. You can see them in the history. We can open the latest. So let's switch to the latest first. And now we should be able to go back to this function and maybe nitpick a little bit. So that's a normal comment to GitHub, so nothing replaces that. Obviously, we can also interact with this review using the chat or agentic capabilities of CodeRabbit. For example, you can just open the generic chat. You can also enter the coding and maybe ask about writing the unit tests. So I'm not sure if something like that exists in our Vue implementation. Probably isn't. Let me give it a try, actually. While it's running, it will be visible in these task sections on the right side. Meanwhile, it doesn't block our review and we can continue. Once all the layers are reviewed, I usually go back into the overview section check again what was done, modified, or commented, and submit the PR as we normally do, which is then will be available to the developer who authored this pull request. And that wraps up our short review of CodeRabbit change stack for today. I actually like that CodeRabbit experiments with the review UI and trying different approaches, because we all know that GitHub review UI and pull request UI has been dead for years. Let me know in the comments if you use any other tools or you also use CodeRabbit. Thanks for watching. The link is in the description, and bye.